Good evening, everybody. My name is Jason Grady. I'm the chairman of the Inland Wetlands Commission, Tom Monroe. I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is the Inland Wetlands Commission, Monroe. It is March the 14th, 2018. It is now 7:07. The first order of business, as always, is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first order of business is to introduce the members of the council here tonight. Or the commission, sorry, not the council. Starting out all the way on my right is Commissioner Clark Ingress. Next is Jim Stewart, who is a licensed professional engineer, a licensed land surveyor with the state of Connecticut. I am Jason Grady, your chairman. Mr. Stewart is also our newly appointed treasurer. Thank you very much. To my left is our vice chairman, Commissioner Jeff Shamus. He's a certified ecologist, professional wetland scientist, and a certified soil scientist. To his left is our secretary, Lois Spence. To her left is Donna Straczynski, who's our inland wetlands coordinator and land use coordinator. And with us, as always, is Rebecca Wood, our recording secretary. For the record, Scott Schatzeline, who is our town engineer, will be joining us a little later. He is in another meeting at the moment. Before we get started, I am supposed to read our mission statement. The objective and purpose of the Inland Wetlands Commission is to provide for the overall protection and preservation of the inland wetlands and water courses within the town of Monroe. The normal course of our meetings, we will hear public hearings and other applications. The protocol for public hearings is to have an applicant make a representation or a presentation to the commission, during which and after which the commission will be asking the applicant questions. The commission will then review town, staff, and other independent comments. The meeting then will be opened up for public comment. I will ask that all comments be made to the chair or the commission. After any and all comments pro, in opposition to, or of a general nature are made, the applicant will be given the opportunity to respond. It is not necessary that the applicant respond, but generally in their best interest to do so. There will be no further opportunity for new questions unless new material is entered in as evidence or testimony during their response. Please keep any and all comments, pro and con, specific to inland and wetlands related matters. Other applications that do not involve a public hearing will follow a similar format, with the exception that there will be no public comments allowed. The meeting follows our published agenda unless otherwise amended. Our agenda is up here in green if anybody would like a copy. Are there any changes to the agenda tonight, Donna?
There are.
Fantastic.
So, let's see, Scott wanted to hold off if possible on the application hearing determination, but that's completely up to you guys on what you want to do with that.
Okay.
And also under item Roman numeral 10, item B, permitted uses as of right, I want to add the addition of a public works project in regards to Pepper Street drainage to the Quantic River at the Brook Street intersection there. And those are the only changes. Well, I said that you could, I guess I should have prefaced this by saying you got a new application that needed a determination.
We do have something in our application hearing
Before I
determination.
told you that you could actually move it.
Understood.
So it's IWC 2018-03. It's in regards to 425 Pepper Street. And you got the new applications in your packets this evening.
Okay.
So, and that needs a determination. Whether you do that now or later is up to you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Do we have to vote to move that to a different part of the agenda?
Well, when we get there.
Okay.
When we get there, I'm assuming we can do that, right?
Yes.
Okay, our next order of business is the minutes of February 28th, 2018.
And you did get hard copies in your packets, but they were emailed to you also.
I will entertain a motion in regards to these minutes.
Move to accept the minutes from last meeting.
I have a motion to accept
Second?
by Commissioner Spence, a second by Commissioner Shamus. Any comments or changes?
One question. I'm listed as abstaining on the minutes.
Yes,
Did I?
yes, you did.
Because I wasn't there? Or just,
The previous meeting you weren't,
really?
unless,
I don't know, I thought,
No, that was Ross, and he said he looked at the video, so he didn't need to abstain.
hold on. Let's do this. Jim, you were absent at the January 10th, and we were voting on the January 24th.
ooh,
Hmm.
oh, okay.
Have it on, unless you,
Wait, I was at the 24th, wasn't I?
yes, you were at the 24th, but we were voting
Voting
on
on
the
the-
previous
Oh,
meeting,
okay.
and you weren't at that one.
Motion
so you
to approve the
abstained.
minutes of then it says motion to approve minutes of January 24th. Follow me?
I follow you, so let's, Interesting. Shall I go back and check that?
I don't really
And
care
correct-
that
make
much.
the
I don't mind,
correction?
I'll take the hit if it's what
No,
you find is
I'll-
correct.
I'll make the correction if needed. If you don't
Sounds
see any
good.
other changes, then you
Okay.
can go ahead and vote on it, but I will double check that.
Anything else from the commission? Okay, so again, we have a motion to approve by Commissioner Spence, a second by Commissioner Shamus. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. All right, next is a period of time reserved for general public participation. This is a period of time reserved for any comments from the public not related to anything on this agenda. Not seeing anybody waving their hands. We will move on to review of bylaws. We all got a copy in today's packet.
No, I think we already voted on them.
We did vote on those.
This
That
was
might
just-
be a,
Did we vote on the final, or?
yes,
Yeah.
yes, and
Okay.
that's
We
what
did
you
last
got, you got
All
your,
right, so we're striking that from the
Yep.
agenda. Thank you. Wow, this is moving faster than we all planned. Thank you very much. Okay, our next order of business on the agenda is application hearing determination. We were asked by our town engineer, who will be joining us hopefully shortly, to pass this until he gets here. I am all for that. Does anybody disagree?
That's fine.
Okay, we'll come back to that as soon as our town engineer comes back. I don't think we need to vote, do we?
I'm sorry, did we get a second on the minutes?
Yes, Commissioner Shamus.
Yeah,
Okay, and it was a unanimous vote?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, sorry.
we're moving too fast.
No
for you.
abstentions.
You're all very funny.
She's like a one-armed paper hanger right now, just give her a little slack.
Stop gumming up the words.
I got this, go ahead.
All right, we okay?
Yes.
So we're all okay with passing the hearing application. We're not tabling, we're just gonna pass and pick it up again when our engineer gets here.
Sounds good.
That's not him. Okay, moving on, we have no subdivision reports or recommendations to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Moving on to regulated activities, we will start with our first public hearing. IWC 2017-13, 94 Elm Street, Baghdadi owner, Olson, representative, Wolf engineer, proposed single-family home with associated site improvements. This is the opening of the hearing, I believe, yes?
It is, yes, and Lois has the legal notice, if she wants to read it into the record.
All eyes on Secretary Spence for reading of the public notice, please. Thank you.
Notice of public hearing in the Wetland Agency in Monroe, Connecticut. Monroe Inland Wetlands Commission will hold a public hearing on Wednesday, February 28, 2018, at 7 p.m. in the Town Hall Council Chambers, 7 Fan Hill Road, on the following applications. IWC 2017-13, 94 Elm Street, Baghdadi owner, Olson representative, Wolf engineer. Proposed single-family home with associated site improvements. Applications are available for review in the Inland Wetlands Office at Town Hall. Copy of this legal notice dated February 9th, 2018 is on file in the office of the Town Clerk by Lois Spence, Secretary.
Thank you so much. Just one, there we go.
All right, and we have the receipts. So I have the receipts, the abutter notices receipts that are being entered as an exhibit.
Thank you. Everybody ready? Could you just name an association for the record, please, sir?
Ronald Wolf, professional engineer with my office in Woodbury, representing the applicant, Peter Olson, who's with me this evening. And property is currently owned by the Baghdadi Family Partnership with the address located at 104 Elm Street in Monroe. The lot was created in a subdivision approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission in 1969. It has an overall area of 1.475 acres. The Farm Mill River is located at the easterly property line, way back here. And these two, there are two existing ponds located on the property shaded in blue here. Elm Street is gray here. The intersection of Elm Street and Purdy Hill Road is just to the west of the property across the street. Just wanted to show you a copy of the original subdivision map. For everyone to see, it's this parcel right here. There should be a copy of that in your file as well. Again, that's from 1969. The wetlands on the property were delineated by Eric Davison, professional soil scientist, in June 2017, and surveyed by Roy Cheney, licensed land surveyor. There's a total of 0.73 acres of wetlands on the property. The westerly portion of the site where the development is proposed contains very well drained sand and gravel. We had a septic system designed. We did soil testing with the health department. I can show you where that is. The proposed house is shaded in brown. The septic system is up in the northwest corner of the lot. We did, as I mentioned before, is well-drained sand and gravels. The water would be, is proposed to be public water supply with connection out to Elm Street. And we have two underground infiltration systems for the stormwater, one proposed for the roof runoff and one proposed for the runoff from the proposed driveway connection to Elm Street. Let's see, there's 1,067 square feet of activity within the upland review area. We do not have any activity proposed within any wetland areas. The upland review activities primarily consist of grading and installation of the underground stormwater infiltration systems. And there's a slight, about 5 feet of the proposed deck on the back of the house is also located with the 100-foot upland review area, which is shown in this, this dashed line right here. We do have an outstanding memo dated February 9th that we're working on. We're working on updating the plans and doing the additional surveying and delineation by the soil scientist. We plan to have that done this week. That work has been somewhat delayed due to snow on the ground. We also have some additional test pits that the town engineer had requested scheduled for this week as well. And
let's see. Some of the items on the memo from the town engineer related to a history of the property, how the ponds were developed, and how the structures got to be on the property. By the structures, I mean there's a small gazebo here. I think this is a little shed. Let me zoom in a little bit. It's a little utility building, and then there's a cantilever timber deck that overhangs the westerly pond, as you could see in this location right here. So with that, I'm going to try and give the mic to a member of the family who could possibly provide a little bit more of a description on the ponds and the structures.
Okay. If you could just state your name and the address.
Absolutely. David Baghdadi, 6 Winton Farm Road in Newtown, Connecticut.
Thank you.
So I'm one of the owners. It's a family partnership. I'm one of the partners. The pond in the back was dug in the late 1970s. Thereafter, about several years later, the pond in the front was dug. I would estimate, to the best of my recollection, probably the 84 through 86 range. The structures, we searched. My dad would have been in charge of doing all this. He's 92 years old, and he's no help informationally. So he doesn't have any recollection or documents of any permits having been pulled to do any of these activities, including the structures. I commissioned my brother to go to the building department and look through their files. They didn't seem to have anything either. But to the best of my recollection, those are probably done around 90 or so, maybe a little bit earlier, a year or two earlier. And I think the gazebo was the last element put in, so that would have been a little bit after that. Anything else?
Can I ask a question? Mr. Baghdadi, you said the first pond and the second pond.
Yeah, the pond in the back, the one closest to the river, was dug in the 1970s.
Okay, so
Yeah.
If you want
first
to
one
use the
and then the
mouse as a pointer, it might
That's what
help
I
you.
understand. You got it.
This one right here.
There you
Okay.
go.
Got it. I assumed that was the one, but for the record, I just wanted to
Absolutely,
make-
you know, clarity
'cause
is
I don't think you would
important.
do the first one and then go.
No, it'd be hard to get back there at that point.
And I'm sorry, I didn't catch it, but when did you say that the dock structure?
This, I believe, was put in the same time that the pond was put in, which was to the best of my recollection, again, because I'm not as young as I used to be, was the 83, 84, 85, 86 range.
Mid-80s.
Yeah, mid-80s. And this, I think, consistent with that, there was a structure here which is no longer here. I think that this shed was here as well with this. The gazebo was put in a few years after that.
What was the purpose of the ponds?
Just my dad he used to plant trees here. So initially, he would draw water from here to irrigate the trees. He had a nursery business in Trumbull, and this field as well had trees. And after the trees got overgrown, he cut them down. He decided to make a park out of it, and he determined in his infinite wisdom that the park would look nice if he had 2 ponds here, because he built over here is a rock waterfall, which couldn't be built back here because this map doesn't show it, but this is a very wooded area right here. So he decided just to beautify the park, he wanted to have a little rock waterfall over here that one could view from the bridge. So recreationally. Initially, there was a quasi-business purpose to it for purpose of the rare pond, but that got abandoned probably the early 80s.
So that deck is 40 years old?
No, the deck is, it's probably somewhere thereabouts. I'm disappointed to say that, yeah, it's been that many years. It's probably
So
about,
what condition-
probably about 30 years old or so.
What con-
I haven't seen it in a while. I imagine that the wood, I remember having to preserve it a couple of times. So, but I don't know how good the wood is. I know the underlying structure is I-beams, steel I-beams, and over here, he had secured the other end of the I-beams with a concrete deposit, which is underneath the grass.
Was it used just to observe the thing, or is it an elevation for boats?
There's no boats. These are navigable waters, at least not that anyone would want to waste their time navigating. It's recreationally. My sister got married here, and we used to have, family picnics and parties.
Do you have any other questions on the history of the structures and ponds? I think that's what we were
No.
trying to figure out when they came about, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And just for clarity, we didn't find any permits and neither did you guys.
Neither did I, nor did I find anything at home, but, given my dad's
Sure.
history as a record keeper, it doesn't surprise me. We could have all the permits in the world, I wouldn't have found one of them.
Okay, thank you for coming and giving us that information. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Are there any questions from the commission at this time? We do realize that we do have some items to work on prior to the next hearing, so we would request the hearing stay open till the next meeting.
Okay. Is there anything, barring what he said that he
Yeah, the
needs
only
to
question I
bring?
have, like, just to follow up, any of those structures, still standing, or are they falling apart? or-
Yeah, I'd love some photos of them.
Yeah, we could
Because my
certainly get
concern
some
is
photos.
If
If
you
they're
decide
rotting
to
away,
keep
they're-
them,
they're
then are
waste.
you gonna come back in a year saying, oh, we've gotta rebuild these?
Well, it'd be the homeowner maybe that would come back.
Yeah. Well, again,
Actually,
yeah.
can we walk the property?
Yeah, it's-
We could walk it and see it
Yeah.
for ourselves.
That'd be
and
fine.
then we get a better idea.
it's,
Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, man.
May we walk the property?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, one of the structures, I recall the larger structure, which is no longer there, was completely rotted. The roof had completely rotted away. And so that was torn out. I don't know what the status of the other ones are.
Okay.
And is the proposal here to permit these structures along with,
When we submitted the application, we didn't know the status of them, or it was just something that I believe the questions appeared on the first memo that we got from the town engineer. So if necessary, if it's possible to permit them,
well, I think now that we know they're there, they'll have to be permitted, yes?
But if they're gonna be, yes, they should be, if they're shown on the plan and we're issuing a permit for the site and it's there. But at the same time, we don't want to issue a permit for something that's dilapidated that
Understood.
could be a liability. So understanding the condition and if it's either gonna come down or it needs to be rehabbed, I don't know, but.
To the extent that it's relevant, the gazebo is not affixed to the ground in any manner. It just sits on a rock bed. You can pick it up with a forklift and move it tomorrow.
It's really that dock thing that I'd be more concerned
Yeah,
with.
'cause yeah, especially that, you said he has I-beams underneath the dock,
Up front.
like it's just gonna be
That one,
rusting right
yeah.
into the water.
So,
And utility building is a wooden shed?
Yeah, and that's not fixed to the ground either. There's no foundation. It's just sitting there.
Okay.
Mr. Wolf, I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
So you had mentioned you're doing topo and additional delineation work?
Yeah, what we're going to do, the town engineer had asked us to put the topography on, and Nav 88 datum. We had originally done the topo just for the house and didn't have any activity down near the floodplain, so we didn't get on the Nav 88 datum. So we're going to do that this week, and then we'll be able to, that would match the FEMA floodplain data.
Okay.
And then another comment was that the soils report should include or provide an assessment report information about the presence and control of invasive plant species if applicable. So Eric Davison, who's the soil scientist, is going to go there and make an evaluation of the invasive species and either provide a report and sketch out on the plan if and where the invasive species exist.
I would just take that another step further, which is typical on
Okay.
applications where you have a river, floodplains, riparian wetlands, you have ponds, forested wetlands. One, his report doesn't have any it mentions soil types, but
Mhm.
there's no soil types identified anywhere on your plan or on, there's no wetland sketch map that would show it. And in terms of an assessment, it's not just an assessment of, you know, the invasives, but the project in general, and, you know, what are the potential impacts with the development on the resources and the buffer area.
So what are the impacts on the buffer area,
Yep,
meaning the upland review area?
the upland review area,
Right.
yep. And on, you know, any of the ponds.
I know, I don't believe there's any invasives up where the house site is. That's all fairly wooded, all pine trees up in there. And,
Yeah, it's more of getting a professional assessment on what the impacts are to the wetlands and watercourses.
This chain link fence is gonna remain?
I believe so. Yeah. Peter, do you know the status of the chain link fence? If it would be, the one, there's one that runs north-south, and then, thank you, and then it kind of takes a jog, and we can provide a response on the fence
Yeah, I mean.
for the next meeting.
And then as well, what's the maintenance gonna happen in between, in the upland route? Is it gonna be mowed and, you know, just so we know for our next meeting?
And then, did you want to schedule a field walk, or is the commission just going to go and look at the,
So, for our next meeting, it's the items that we just discussed, because we're gonna keep them open, because they were still pending some stuff. What else, and is there anything else anybody else wants to see? So they have all the information before we let them out of here?
If the assessment report from the environmental person, if it's Davison, recommends, you know, if the ponds are mowed right to the edge or are somehow compromised, and it would be better suited in the long term to create some kind of shrub zone or buffered edge zones, that would be a positive. But, you know, some of those things he can take into consideration.
okay, I'll discuss that with him.
What is your thought for a yard? I mean, is this area between the proposed house and the southerly pond, we'll call it, is that wooded at the moment, or is it open field? What is it? Open field. It's open field.
It'd be good to have like a tree line.
Yeah, we could do that, too.
Because
I
I was
think,
thinking, it looked like that the end of the yard was going to be very close to the, where the upland review area is. I was gonna suggest that you do a little bit more yard, but have a substantial buffer between the pond and the house. Treed, bushes, whatever, just not mown all the way up to the edge.
There is shrubs.
Sir, if you wouldn't mind, can you just introduce yourself, just so we have your name for the record? I appreciate it.
Yep. My name is Peter Olson. I'm the applicant. There is, right along the pond, there are bushes growing there. It's basically from the,
If you would use the
Yeah.
mouse to point, so the cameras pick
the
it up.
one with the septic plan. From like the gazebo area along this area, there's bushes growing, and from here down around here, there's bushes growing. The only part that's really field and grass is basically kind of comes up to the gazebo area and kind of comes, you know, like sort of like that. There's only, it's not all, this area right in here is the open field. Everything else is kind of bushes growing along the pond area. So it doesn't, the grass does not come all the way up to the pond.
Thank you.
Could you depict that when you come up with your new plan? Can that be depicted as to what is presently existing? Especially if you're planning on keeping it that way?
Sure.
That would be nice to see on the plan. And, what was I thinking? Oh, and wherever the best places would be to put wetland markers so that there is notations that there is regulated area there.
There are flags all the way around the pond.
Now, these aren't flags, these are special markers
Permanent.
that you can get
Oh,
through
okay,
us.
okay, all right.
And we usually, when you talk to Scott, he'll give you all the particulars on that, so.
Do you usually request those be placed on the limit of the buffer area? Is that where they're typically?
It depends.
Okay.
It depends on, each situation is a little bit different, so.
Does the commission have a desire or a thought as to where they would want them, so we can propose them?
Say wherever the end of your yard is, initially.
Yeah, usually they demarcate the area that we prefer not to have any further
Intrusion.
intrusion.
I guess it would be
or-
good to have on the plan, what is your proposed lawn
We-
area?
we're gonna
limits
add
of
that, yeah.
Disturbance, all that stuff, you know? Soil and erosion control plans at that limit, you know, that stuff.
So I guess what we're saying is that when, on the plan, we're gonna put where your proposed lawn is at the
Yeah.
edge of that.
Sure.
Would be a good place to start with the markers, and if we need to move them,
Yeah.
we can.
Mhm.
I just want to say for the record, Town Engineer Scott Schatzline joining the meeting at 7:35.
That's all I can think of.
So we've discussed, we got some testimony from Mr. Baghdadi about the structures that we were asking about, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the first pond went in the late 70s, the second pond in the mid-80s, along with the deck, and then the gazebo early 90s, I believe, right? Is that what you said?
That's correct.
And the gazebo and the utility building are not affixed to the ground, and the deck is supported by steel I-beams with concrete under the ground. Just because I know we were talking about that at some
Yep,
point.
yep. Thank you.
So we've discussed, as a commission, we've discussed some things that we'd like to see, because we're keeping the hearing open because they're going through some stuff. And I think there was, so the last issue I guess we were talking about was trying to figure out how to deal with the structures. I think there was some indication of interest in some of the commission wanting to see the structures and see the condition, because we don't want to issue an approval on unpermitted structures that are,
Falling apart.
yes, thank you, the technical term of falling apart. So what, is there anything else besides the possible site walk that we want to discuss so that the applicant knows what to bring back to us next time?
Well, I had a question for Scott. Does the fact that the pond is within the FEMA zone have any issue? It's within the flood zone.
I didn't think it was, hold on, am I getting this, where are you picking that up?
Floodline is, the 100-year floodline goes directly through the southerly pond, through the middle of the southerly pond. If you can see if there's a
Yeah,
line that runs right there.
We expect that was,
Oh, okay, I remember, all right.
that was off the FEMA map. We expect that that's probably going to change when we do the borings and look for the limits of the alluvial soil deposits where the floodplain actually is. In my discussion with the soil scientist, he appears to think that it's the actual field limit of the floodplain is right adjacent to the Farm Mill River, just west of it on the slope. Because the areas where the pond were, it's going to be hard to tell where the floodplain is there, because that was disturbed when the ponds were dug. So we hope to get that actual field limit of the floodplain determined within the next few days here, hopefully.
Right, so once they do that, once they determine the elevation, the floodplain regulations, I believe, are adopted in around 85 or so. And I'm not aware, I'm gonna guess that when the pond was built, there was no permit for that either, it was just done. The regulations have changed in the, few years ago, they changed so that nowadays, when you do work in a floodplain, you have to have compensatory, but just thinking about it, if there was a grade there and they created a pond, if anything, they've excavated,
Great.
really is a wash because it filled up with water. So it's really only the freeboard above the water that would be the storage capacity anyway. So in a way, they, if it wasn't a pond before, it means the grade was a little higher, right? And now it's a pond, so they did excavate. So I'm gonna guess that permitting it would probably be easy enough to achieve.
All right, the other, that led me to the second line, which ran between the two ponds, which said there was a deed restriction having to do with changes in contour. The entire pond is in that area. I'm assuming that there must have been some change in contour to develop the pond, so I just wanted to see what the legality of that was, so.
That's a completely different, that's difficult to say. I mean, there's a deed restriction.
That was a private restriction,
Yeah,
which
those
I
are
have
subject
here
to a
with
three-year
me.
statute of limitations.
Who's the holder of the deed restriction, do you know? Who is the holder of it?
My guess is because the lot emanates from a subdivision, and without looking at the other lots in the subdivision, it's probably a common scheme restriction that encumbers all the parcels on the subdivision map, and so any party who buys a lot subject to the, which appears in the subdivision map would have the right of enforcement. However, those are, by statute, those are subject to a 3-year statute of limitations.
Well, I mean, we'd have to see the specific wording on that. So it wasn't a deed restrictions like a conservation easement that was offered during the
No, I believe.
It was more of a deed,
Yeah, if you want to.
it was more a covenant to protect the developer.
Yeah, I believe so. I'm going to take a look. Yeah, it was imposed by Mooney, and Francis Mooney was the subdivider
Okay.
per the map. And yeah, it looks exactly like a private deed restriction. It's not imposed by the town. It's not imposed by any governmental authority.
Well, it's not, I'm not referring to something that's imposed by the town. What I'm saying is sometimes what happened was when people subdivided, they would offer a deed restriction. And in doing so, the commission accepted the deed restriction as further protection, and they can't require it, they can only accept it. If that were the case, then the town becomes a holder of the easement.
Okay.
And if that's the situation, then that's not an easy thing to answer. I mean, on the other hand, this happened like years and years ago.
Right.
So, I don't think anything will come of it. I mean, to me, it would sound kind of crazy to
Okay.
we try to remove a pond and restore it to something that's so.
And this application is not having to do with anything beyond that line anyway, so.
Well, the only problem with it is there is a state statute which requires that the applicant provides notice to the holder of the conservation easement 60 days before the hearing in order for that issue to be vetted. So what happens is typically I'm sorry. Thinking, who's doing that? So what happens is typically the letter is sent to the town, the selectmen. The town looks at it and then advises the commission whether or not there is a violation of that easement. And then, at least till now, the town has taken the easier route in saying, look, we're gonna defer that to the commission as far as what the remediation, if anything, that needs to be done. It's not handled, historically, it has not been handled as a separation, because it gets way too complicated, because it involves the town council and the commissions, and it gets crazy. So, to make it easy, at least the ones we've had in the past, it gets deferred to the commission level. So, my understanding is you're keeping this hearing open, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so what we can do is, I can take a look at that easement, and if need be, we can get that started so that that process can be folded into what we're doing here.
Okay.
As I said, this is the first one that I've ever dealt with that has a clear disturbance in the easement area. And at least from a practical standpoint, I would think that, you know, would we really want that remediated? I mean, that would be a huge, that would be
It would be a big, big jump.
a big, yeah. And what would it really accomplish if you think about it? So I'd probably get a little bit of legal advice from town council, SEL, you know, and provide that input to the commission at the next meeting.
Okay.
Do we have anything else before our next meeting? Did you want to get information so we could do a site walk? Or
Yes, yeah. So they would call, who should they call to schedule the site walk? Should they call you, Mr. Baghdadi?
We call Mr. Olson.
Okay. And I think I have your number. So what I'll do is I'll talk to the commission, I'll email them, and they'll call to set up. They can only go really 2 or 3. They can't have a quorum. So it may just be one visit, and they'll report back to everybody else, and so, okay? All right.
Can you guys give me or us for the file copy of that easement? I don't see it here, so we don't have that yet, right? Or do we? I don't remember from the process.
We can provide a copy, it's not a problem.
Yeah, if you could
Okay.
definitely provide a copy of that.
All right, and then you want me to read the,
And so, I'm sorry, are you guys ready to move on, or is?
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I'm not sure if anything else you want to deal with now.
well,
This one.
typically we'd have public comment because they have opened it.
Mhm.
Okay.
And then also, I would urge you guys to call me to talk about these asterisk items.
Okay.
Because those typically are things that you should have an answer for.
Mhm.
And we
I-
want to make sure you're ready at the next meeting.
Yeah, we're planning on doing the additional field work between this week and next week, so just because of the weather conditions and the snow cover, we just been putting it off, but we're going to try and get it done within the next week and have all these items addressed for the next hearing.
Okay, and call me ahead of time, because if we spend a little bit of time, the goal would be to get you in a good shape, so we're
Yep.
on the same page for the next meeting, so you
Sure.
move along.
Okay.
Thank you very much. So at this time, we have opened the public
Open to
public hearing, sorry. So I will open this up for anybody who wants to make a comment in opposition to this application. Any comment for this application? Any comments of a general nature for this application? All right. Seeing none, we will open it up for public comment once again at our next hearing date, with new testimony being offered. Until then, see you at the next one. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Meetings.
We can do that.
Is it the next, 2 weeks, yeah?
March 28th.
March
It's March
28th.
28th. And Ron, I'll send you an email, and both of you, updating you as like timelines and things like that, so.
Yeah, get that easement to me as soon as you can.
I'll email it to you. Maybe I'll give you a call tomorrow, just to see.
Sure.
Okay, thanks again.
It was nice to see you, Ron.
Okay, moving right along. IWC 2018-01-R, 98 Enterprise Drive. And once we finish the regulated activities, we'll go back to the hearing determination. I feel like we're on a roll for the public hearings. Let's keep it up. 98 Enterprise Drive, Enterprise Drive LLC, Bartoli Partner, Edwards Engineer, site development to construct building and storage area and remediation of IWV 2017-02. Public hearing scheduled for tonight's meeting. Good evening.
Good evening. You might need some help here.
Actually, just let me add something to
We
the
all
end
need
of what
I need a lot of help.
It's all right, I'll help you in just a sec, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, we have,
The notice was already read predominantly by our chairman, but the rest of it says, applications
Usually
are
pops
available
up.
for review in the Inland Wetlands Office at Town Hall. Copy of this legal notice dated February 23rd, 2018 is on file in the office of the town clerk. By Lois Spencer.
I'll figure that out at some point before I'm impeached.
Don't worry
Not
about
my
that.
turn.
If I fall, and two other people fall, you're,
Yeah, I'm not worried.
we won't have a forum.
There it is. Just got to turn it this way. Okay, for the record, my name is Larry Edwards. Thank you for waiting. What we have before you is a new application for the property at 98 Enterprise Drive. There is currently an application which is in place for this property, and it is near the time limit for the extensions that have taken place over the last 10 years. And we had discussed with Scott the procedure to go through to come before you, whether it was going to be, and there was a cease and desist order placed by your commission for the activity that had taken place in terms of the preparation of the site over the last 10 years and the current use of the site as a place for stockpile of material. And so we have, my clients have been before you a couple meetings, and there was an issue of whether we were going to come back for a restoration plan, a modification of the current application, or a new application. And it was decided that the best approach for all parties involved was to submit a new application, which is what we have done now. And we are moving forward with that application. And what I'm going to try to do tonight is, first of all, show you the differences of what the two applications were from what is currently in place to what we are proposing. And then I am going to go through Scott's comments and try to address his comments. And then we are going to require the hearing to be continued because, as was the previous application, our soil scientist, one of the comments that was generated by Scott was we wanted the soil scientist to go out and review the wetlands in correlation to what we had reflagged based on the original application. And with the snow cover that's been on for the last 3 weeks, that's not possible. So we are going to need to extend for that item, and we are also going to have to extend to address Scott's latest comments, which we just got a few days ago. So I'll try to just go step by step through this, and again, any questions as we go. Currently, this is the existing conditions map, which shows what has been done to date, and without any idea of what we are proposing to do. This is, and I'll come back to this, but this is the proposed application as we're going to submit it. And I should have one in here that is this, and again, we have taken this, and in the red, we are showing what was the limits of the original application, and in the dark color behind is what we are proposing now. So if you're looking at the area immediately adjacent to the wetlands. The red limit of, the original limit of the actual pavement is shown in red here, and one of Scott's latest comments, this block right here is actually the original application. We should have had it in red. It's in the wrong color.
Where are you, oh, I'm sorry.
Right here.
See the-
This was a bunker area that was originally proposed, which we are no longer including in our application, or we're putting it in a different area. And the red comes up around here. The original driveway, as it's now constructed, comes all the way around here and gains access to a level area here. Originally proposed, there were 2 buildings, one here, and the extension of the parking was all the way out to here. The stormwater basin is, get in a little bit closer on that. The basin is roughly in the same area. The dark, let me get this right, the red is the older limits of what was going to be the construction limits. The septic system before was down in this area with the reserve area over here. This was the demarcation planting buffer, which came all the way down to here, around here. In this area, we are pushing that out a little bit because we've made the detention basin slightly bigger for 2 reasons. Number one, there was originally a second basin located actually off the property, which collected the runoff from that upper driveway. And that has changed my stormwater analysis because of the fact the impervious area is going in different directions. But the other thing that has increased the size of it slightly is the current rainwater data that we're using has changed. Scott is now asking us to use the NOAA intensity factors versus the older SES, which has increased the peak flows at the higher storms slight amount. Actually, the smaller storms are less. The 100-year and 50-year are a little bit bigger. But again, the detention area is in the same area. You can see this was the old limit of it. We have pushed it back to this limit. But again, we have pulled back in this area and taken this whole area of disturbance out of the proposed application. So that just gives you an overall understanding of what the difference is from the originally proposed application to what is currently being proposed. I'm just going to go back to the application that we have here before you now. The overall plan, this whole area here has basically stayed the same. Again, this limit of construction along here is the same, except for now we deleted that bump out for the bulk storage that we had here. We have, instead of bringing this driveway all the way around the back of these buildings, we are shortening it and bringing it in to the center of the site. This has eliminated some of the impervious area. You can see that whole driveway around there now has been eliminated, and we've shortened it up coming this direction. We have, again, reworked the detention basin slightly, and we have also taken and separated out the clean roof water from the proposed building, put that into a direct infiltration system of its own, and there will be another discharge of, I believe, a 4-inch pipe that comes out of this that will discharge off into a pad in this area right here. Again, our way that we like to work, we like to take the roof runoff, separate it from the pavement runoff, because the pavement or the roof runoff doesn't really have to be treated. It just has to be infiltrated. So we've put a separate system in for that. Overall, the amount of material required is basically the same, because as I said, everything is the same. We have changed the configuration. Again, we have one building here. We have equipment storage proposed here and here. What we're using as bulk storage, is had over in this area here, and this area will be for some additional parking and also an area in order to get trucks and so forth to get turned around once we get down in here, which is the same basic configuration that was on the original application. The septic system that we show has been pulled back, so we're farther away from the edge of the wetlands with that. Likewise, this demarcation buffer planting has been pulled back for a lot in this area, but again over here it's a little bit farther, a little bit closer, but overall the overall disturbance line has been moved farther back from the wetlands than originally was proposed. I'm just going to go over now Scott's comments and try to address and indicate what we've done for them. We have some additional items that he's requested or that we had some clarification on we talked today that I think that we will take care of and get to you before the next meeting so that you can have a clean set of plans by the time you have to make a decision on. Again, going through his comments, I'm just going to hit the ones that are still outstanding. Number B2, submitting a soil report update, that we just explained that we will have that for the next meeting. A couple of the items that he had seen, that he had picked up that we did not have correct, like, this bulk storage area that should have been red, not shown as black. And the only other item he had originally had asked us to put the original contours on, the contours as they now exist, and the proposed. We tried. We just couldn't get all three of them. It just was a blur of lines. So we felt that it's probably the most important thing was to get from what is existing to what is going to be the final grading. So that's what we left here. Again, there's a limit of disturbance line, which is incorrectly colored from black to red, which we will take care of. The items, and this wasn't an additional thing he wanted, but he just has listed that was going to be discussed, which I started to discuss. We basically have an additional point of discharge for this infiltrator system. There's a change in the limits of the buffer planting line, and there was an item in the his original comments were regarding the plantings on this planting strip being possibly moved off of the embankment, which we have done. We're proposing it at the bottom of the slope and not into the embankment area of the basin.
Just a clarification on that, Larry. They were talking about this plantings here.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and the original comment was that they wanted it up on the berm more, and I think what happened was the previous application, the final plan moved them down, or excuse me, moved them up as far as they felt they could go, and they didn't really want to get them further up on the slope for stability purposes. And that's where, so I don't know if that's where you want to go, but I think this is what they were talking about, these.
Okay,
plans.
okay. Okay, planting, I have shown these to be the plantings exactly the way they proposed them on the original plan, in a straight line with plant right after the other. Scott's comment was, and it's a valid point, is maybe we should stagger them to give a little more diversity to the plantings. My argument to that is I think it's intended to be a demarcation line, and I think it's more effective to keep it in a straight line for future than it is to stagger them and then not really have any delineation to it except for the fact that there's bushes over there. So we can stagger them if that's what the commission wants, we'll just go at the direction. But it's my feeling, we're kind of keeping evergreens in there as the delineation of the line, and the other softer plantings in between, but I think the evergreens will act as a demarcation for any future occupant of the facility.
What plants are you talking? Because there's no
I
planting
know you were going to
plan.
ask that.
No planting plan included, so we really need to know what kind of plants
No,
you're
I
talking.
do have them right,
Well,
I've got
There's a
them in
planting
here.
list on the.
Yeah, there's a
site
planting
plan.
list.
The site plan, on the bottom.
I
is
mean,
the
you're
plan.
I stand
I'm on the wrong
corrected.
plan, that's what I'm
Yeah,
looking.
go to the site plan.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we have included a planting list.
On the bottom.
There we go.
There you
Now I
Oh,
see it.
thank you,
I'm
down
sorry.
here. Yep,
I
and
did
that's a planting list for this planting area here and for this across the back, so.
Yeah, and then it took me a while to find it, but the planting list for this area I was talking about is right here.
Oh, there it is.
Couldn't find it at first.
I can't understand why, I couldn't find it either, so.
Let me see.
Okay, the next item is, I think we already discussed that, that was this planting location on that steeper slope. His next comment was to do with test pits, which we did do. Your plans show them on the plan as test pit D and test pit C. On the plans we provided you, the layer got turned off or whatever, but the data isn't on here, but we did do the tests, and we'll include that on the revised plans. The next item is basically concerning the outlet, and Scott had some legitimate comments about our inverts, and we have to do some adjustment to that to make sure we have it going to function the way we intended to function, so, that we'll take care of. And likewise, he wants dimensions on the outlet control structure, which we will provide. I think we went through the drainage map today. I think I'm okay on that. There was an issue of the numbers don't add up, but the roof area was what we were missing, and that is included in there, so I think we're covered on that. Storage data, again, that's a technical item which Scott has requested, and we'll provide the computations for that. Likewise, the next one is a drainage issue also. Now I'm down to, what am I going to? 9. Scott's comment opened it up. We originally had proposed the whole thing to be paved, which is what I think is going to end up happening, the whole. But he indicated and showed what was going to be paved and what wasn't going to be paved. So we did propose a section to be, the light color would be normal asphalt pavement. In the area that we're going to have possibly construction equipment with the bulk storage areas and such, we are, on this plan, proposing it to be milling surface. And Scott indicated in conversation today that that may not be allowed by the Planning and Zoning Commission anyway, so I got to review that with Will and find out if that's a possibility. If not, then we're just going to change it back to all pavement. So that I will find out between now and the next meeting. 11, again, that's details that we will take care of before we get to the.
Oh, number 10, we didn't talk about. You had asked,
Oh, okay, I'm
you
sorry.
weren't sure what I was referring to, and what I was talking about there is typically the commission requires that you put you're familiar with the wetland markers?
Yeah.
That you put the markers along somewhere, typically it's along the limits of the area that is intended to be maintained.
Along our buffer, our planting land.
Yeah, like that's gonna be, and my guess is, I don't know how much main down on the slope, you probably will do some to keep that septic system in good shape, right? So
It'd probably be mowed, yeah.
yeah, so typically the markers would go probably down at the toe of slope would be my guess.
That's fine.
And the commission obviously can weigh in on
It
that.
could be along the tree line, the proposed tree line, so essentially the limited disturbance line.
Yeah, exactly. So that's no problem. We'll show that. I just didn't understand the statement when he had brought it. We didn't discuss it today.
If you didn't have the septic system down there, I'd say put it along the top of slope.
Yeah.
Because then it just keeps people away from that, and that is another option.
Well,
to just-
perhaps at the top of slope for the whole area, except to whatever area is needed to maintain the system, and then go back to the top of slope.
Well, that's true too. They could put like a marker there, a marker here, a marker here, and then go along then go back up to along the top.
Well, but don't
But then you
forget-
got the
yeah,
detention.
the-
You know
yeah.
what, along the
Yeah.
plantings.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, how do you plan on getting to the detention basin to maintain it? I don't see a ramp.
It's a valid point. I'll take a look at that.
And that overflow spillway that you have, for whatever reason, maybe it's a good reason, is not on your, everything else seems to be, except for that, not on the erosion control plan as a part of that basin.
Well, it wouldn't be necessarily a function of the erosion control plan. I can tell you why it's not on there, because that erosion control plan was done at an earlier date, and I didn't update it, so we can put it on there, that's not a problem.
Well,
But
the new
it's
flared
not
end
something
is-
that's gonna go into
okay.
the erosion control plan.
Well, the new flared end is there, and it looks like the
Yep.
topography has changed, so it was just,
Yep, no, it's,
Yeah.
basically, that's a separate drawing model that
Yeah.
comes in, and I didn't update that along with the,
You're not in paper space.
don't even-
Are you proposing any swirl technology type devices for
Sorry.
stormwater?
uh,
Like Vortechnics, storm tree?
We're not proposing any at this point. I mean, our basin and our forebay, we meet all the stormwater quality requirements in terms of volumes. And to be honest with you, the original plan didn't show it on it either. If that becomes a major concern of the commission, obviously that's something we'll look at.
Which leads to my question, what kind of business is going in here?
That's the problem with the whole real estate economy right now. They don't know. You know, they're proposing it, and I believe, and my client is here, they're gonna be looking to probably rent parts of that building to people that have construction equipment that are looking for a place to maintain it and store it.
Okay, so what kind of storage are we talking outside?
That's equipment storage, so it's gonna be outside construction equipment or landscaping equipment.
No, yeah, bulk material storage area, what kind of bulk material?
That would be gravels and stone.
How about millings?
It could be millions.
Probably could put mulch too, who knows?
No budgets
It's
or
not, it's not gonna be big enough, but it could be. It's gonna be probably for one of the,
Yeah.
because it's very little that you're allowed to keep on the outside. So it's gonna be one material probably of whatever type is, that
Well, if it's
particular
one of the
kind.
dirtier ones, like millings, for instance, we need a higher level of water quality treatment, considering you're right on the river.
I'll check with, and see if that is something we want to do, or whether we want to exclude that from the,
I think my own opinion is I think you need to beef up some of the devices, structural devices, not just non-structural, for stormwater, especially when you have outdoor equipment, you have bulk storage that we don't know what it is. But there needs to be some belt and suspenders approach, and catch basins going into a detention basin, going into the wetlands directly. I mean, literally, you're, 10 feet, 5 feet from the wetlands. There needs to be a better approach to stormwater management.
okay.
That's my opinion. For the type of use of the property.
Now, when you're redoing the plan, you might have mentioned this before, if you did, please excuse me, but you've got 2 LODs on this site plan, so we
Two
need
what?
to, 2 LOD lines.
Oh, no.
And one of them needs to be removed.
Limits of disturbance, okay.
Yeah. You got the one that was originally,
Yep, I know exactly why it's there.
okay.
It needs to be on the red plan, not this one.
Right. And I have a question concerning the existing conditions. The plan that you gave us is dated October 17th. October 1st, I apologize. And yet, it's different, significantly different than anything you can see online from aerial photographs. That entire area where that one big contour is, if you go straight down from where your hand is now. Oh, there we go. Oh, I got control. All right. This whole area, this whole area has already been cleared. There's machinery in there. It's completely devoid of vegetation. And there's several maps online that have that indicate that that's already been the subject of quite a bit of activity.
I don't believe there's any,
Answer that.
okay, this is,
Dan Bartoli, one of the owners of the property. So that area that you're pointing to, there was a stone retaining wall there. That was partially there when we acquired the land,
Is that along here?
right along that 428 elevation, right where you're pointing. We modified that wall slightly, but there is no equipment beyond that wall. There's some wood chips there that we used to bed the silt fence with.
There's a lot of stumps and logs and things.
That was there. That was all the, what was cleared
Yeah,
when we
so
acquired
that's
the
sitting
land.
there.
It's just sitting there still.
But wouldn't that be okay, because it's still within the limited disturbance of what was previously approved?
Well, it is. It's, I had indicated in my comments that
Was
it
it?
should
Okay.
be indicated so that you can discuss.
So it's just,
what
it's
you want
not
to
on
do.
the existing conditions, which is, so it's different than the existing
Yeah, they,
condition map.
that's what I had
indicates
put,
that it
they
is.
didn't pick it
Oh,
up.
I see
So-
what
on
you're
their
saying,
plan.
existing condition.
All the
Yeah,
wood
I'm
debris
trying
and
to make sure
stumps
that it's-
was scattered throughout that area.
The other-
We had to get in there with a little machine to get the silt fence back up, and then we gathered it and pushed it all towards the wall.
The other thing that I pointed out was that the survey didn't, also, survey and the plan, in number 2, my comment number 2, the original plan showed, just a minute. It showed,
Mouse hog.
stone walls, field stone walls down here along the wetlands. Probably a different plan I
no,
want.
I know that,
Oh, go ahead, sorry. And the plan called for those walls to be, there were the sections filled in with additional wall to create a buffer. So that was one of my comments as to, it doesn't show those walls. Were they removed?
No.
Are they there?
they're still there.
Well, they weren't sophisticated walls. Those are
Yeah, they
farm
were,
walls, just-
let's call them wall remains.
Right.
Yep.
The typical thing you'd see in a wooded area. You know, once upon a time, when it was a farm area, they had a field, farm wall there, and it just kind of falls down or settles in after a number of years. But there was somewhat of a stone wall, and the previous plan called for extending and that wall and filling in the gaps. So I just thought I'd mention that so that you can resolve that, whether that's something that you're going
Is
to
that,
be
yeah, still a
continuing or.
proposal, or?
So some of that wall is beyond the limited disturbance right now.
Yeah, that's what I
And
was,
we were gonna leave well enough alone out there. I mean, there are remnants, and it just looks like a heap of, there may, prior to us owning it, somebody may have stolen some of that stone for their own use or whatever, but.
yeah, because they are, I think they're down, we'll locate them.
Yeah, I think if you locate
Yeah,
it, maybe
that's
make
not a
them a moot
problem.
issue.
But I think you're gonna find that they're pretty close to the wetland, and I would agree that I don't know if it's a positive or negative to go in there and be playing with them. If we're gonna establish, you know, you're gonna have your markers, you're gonna have your planting buffer, that's kind of a, you know, I don't know if it's gonna do more disturbance than it's gonna do good. But we will show them, I mean, we'll look at them.
And there isn't enough stone there to fill it in. You have to bring something in to do it.
Yeah, and I think, the more you're talking, I think it was along the limits of their original disturbance, which you saw in the red line plan, is closer to the wetland.
Well, it's still there, it's down there. The
Yeah.
LOD is still down
Yeah,
on this plan.
so that, they were doing that because they were closer to the wetland and they
Oh,
were
right.
marking it with the wall itself.
Mhm.
So that may
Yeah,
become a
I
moot
think,
issue
yeah,
when you
I think,
actually
yeah,
show
because,
it.
again, it's closer, so, but I'm pretty sure it's, in some places it's right up against the wetlands. Because again, that's a lot of times is.
That's what they did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they built them as far as they could go, and then they left it, but we'll show them, that's not a problem, we'll show them in the next go-round.
In answer to your question before concerning the soldier course, I would like to see a deeper buffer, not just a single row, whether it be staggered or not. I would like to see something a little bit deeper.
Well, if I could recommend, and why don't we leave the evergreen row as kind of a steady, and then we'll stagger the planting in between, so that it'll give it a little bit of a, it's just my opinion. I just think it's more of a delineation with it being a straight
The
uniform
delineation
line.
is fine, I just like to see depth of buffer.
Well, that's what I'm saying,
between
we'll
the wetlands
stagger the
and-
plantings between them, so that you'll get a depth to it, but we'll maintain the evergreen row as being a steady row, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And then would there be a maintenance plan, schedule, whatever, or something to think about? The stormwater management plan, how you're gonna, maintain the site, maintain the catch basins,
I
any
think we have it,
structures?
but I think I included.
Well, if you're gonna propose something different, it might change, but.
Yeah, if we're gonna have a
Yeah.
collector, then that'll add a different component to it, but yeah.
Is there any way to pull that flared end that you have starting at around elevation 414, even back to 416?
Okay, this is back in here?
Down there.
Oh, let me get to the right plan first. Oh, so I hit the right button. What you're saying here, pull it back?
If you could, where it starts is at 414? And if you, just about, maybe 415, if you pulled it back to the 416 line, is that possible?
Well, 16, no, because you gotta remember, the top of the berm is 16.
Yeah, that's true.
So I've got to be down to the 412 line with some sort of outlet, or at least 414. But based on what we were just discussing, it's going to be lower than that because we got to lower our pipe in the outlet. So it's not going to change much. I could change it a little bit, but you all may have to be down to 414 or they're close. I mean, this is going to have a pitch to it. This is going to be flat, so we're going to pick up a little bit of pitch as it comes back because I think I've got it at
The only thing you can
411.
do in lieu of all that, in other words, he designed the pad for the velocity
That's
coming
right.
out of there. So that's where the 15 feet comes from. The only other thing that they could do is put a level spreader, so it's,
Yeah.
like half as long, and then put a rigid lip on it, so that, and then just do the quick equation to see if the
Well,
velocity.
you know what I could do? This was sized with my overflow being my control structure.
Yeah,
So if I don't need to hold my 100-year storm, the overflow will go out that side. I could possibly reduce the size of that path. You understand what I'm getting at?
You're saying that 100-year overflow is through the spillway?
Well, now I have a spill. I really have two because my structure has the overflow
Well, the
component to
100-year
it.
doesn't get up to the spillway, right? It goes over the spillway once you exceed.
It's emergency, yeah. That's where the .2 was in my plan. One is a
Well,
.2 and one is a.
Yeah, I think you need the 100-year, because if you get it, it's just gonna blow it out of there and into the well.
Okay.
My suggestion would be to put not as long as riprap, put a longer rigid lip in.
Okay.
Typically, what people use is a couple pieces of precast curving.
Yeah, okay.
And then you just look at the sheet flow over the rigid lips, and you get it down to 3
Yep.
feet per second. Let's do it. Quick manners, quick.
I would also ask why the planting stopped where they did, because there's considerable, if you pull the plant out a little bit, so we can see the whole thing.
They stopped there because that's where they stopped before, but
On the other end, yeah.
Yep.
You see how there's still gonna be a considerable amount of disturbance to create that slope,
that's
that
already done.
riprap slope, so.
That's already there.
That's there,
Yep. That's existing.
so what is beyond that? You've got an LOD line there, what is between the slope and the LOD
That's
line?
native wooded
Yeah,
area.
native wooded.
Okay.
Again, that's following roughly where the silt fence is, so that's the line, but this is all in. Basically, this was, the only place that we're gonna be modifying anything in terms of the perimeter end of that parking area is gonna be here. Everything else is already in place, or it's gonna be, this area is filled, and that's grading, proposed grading, and there's some proposed grading here, but everything over here is as is existing, so there won't need to be anything over there.
Another question, is it necessary really to take down the entire slope between the driveway and the wall? Can't that just, you've got a lot of native netted vegetation up there.
Where's this done?
Just pull it down, go up toward the road. You've got a lot of native vegetation that runs the entire length of the property. And it appears here that you're taking down everything and regrading it. Why don't you just leave what you got?
Probably
Good, because it's less than, a lot of it's less than 2 to 1, for one thing. Because a lot of that, remember, this has all been, back to the,
Yeah, but it's native, it was there to start with.
I don't know if
P&Z
anything on
doesn't
that
make you
lot is
take out
native.
things that are,
Nothing native there.
Yeah, there's nothing native there. Again, if you look here, this road is already, this is much steeper than 2 to 1 now. So we're grading it back to get the grade.
You're filling in some places
Yeah,
to get the grade,
yeah,
not take cut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's rock face over there.
So,
It's all rock.
so right now, it's far steeper than it's gonna be, but this has all been disturbed. I don't think there's anything native in that side hill. Between the road was constructed and when this was done, that whole area has been disturbed.
I could have sworn I saw trees, I drove by it today.
Feet, there's soil, and then after that, it drops off and it's all rock ledge, just exposed rock.
Okay, so the first
Along the
20 feet
driveway.
then is native?
Well, it's not native, it's originally from, I don't know, how big are the trees? Are they,
There's nothing big there.
yeah, they're just small, whatever's grown up since the
Small
road
is
was
a
road
opened.
went in,
relative
yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
small and then there's small, it's,
But, this was all, this whole embankment was constructed with the road. So whatever's theirs was part of the road
Okay.
construction.
And
It is
going
12
back
years
when
old.
this was done, we found out that this was the lot where they stored all their material during the construction of the road. They dumped all their boulders over there.
how fun,
It was their storage yard.
yeah. Okay. All right, I think I'm done with my questions. Oh, no, I'm not. There's always that one more. This may be something that's not possible, but would it be sensible, and that's the other thing, may not be sensible, to make more of a circuitous route going through the detention basin so that the water gets more chance to be cleansed with the plants than what it is here? I mean, the last couple of classes I went to were recommending that you make a serpentine path for the water to follow. And that doesn't quite fit what they were talking about.
I mean, I suppose we could,
Well, since we're
But our-
talking about enhancing
yeah.
stormwater quality,
Yeah.
that might be an easy way to
Yeah.
do it.
okay. I don't think that's gonna satisfy what,
Well, and Jeff was, he was
I'm talking
trying to,
about more structural
yeah,
stuff.
I know what you're talking about. I know what you're talking about.
but every little bit helps,
Yeah.
with,
Yeah, I will tell you though that that basin's kind of small to do that. You know, and I know what you're talking about. A lot of times you look for a berm down the middle, and what it'll send it down to the other end of the basin
Right.
before it goes to the outlet.
Yep.
Because it is, you're right, it is a little funky in that, you know, you got the inlet here and the outlet right there
yeah.
in line with it.
Mhm.
So one says it's gonna kind of filter through this and go to the outlet. It's never gonna get up in here unless it's just short duration. I
Well,
don't know.
long duration is when it's gonna get up.
Right,
Oh, excuse
yeah.
me, long duration.
Yeah.
Or,
And,
or unless it's directed there.
You know, I'd have no problem making our overflow for, up in this corner. And that way we would get it coming off of here
Yeah,
versus,
that's
you know,
good, yeah.
Mhm.
getting it down
There
here,
you
so.
go.
It's a good
Okay.
compromise.
All right.
Anything else from the commission?
Mr. Treasurer?
He's busy counting our money.
Okay. So we are gonna keep the hearing open for some additional stuff. At this time, I will open it up for public comment. Anybody in the audience wants to speak in favor of this application? Any in opposition? Any of a general nature? No response, so we will open up again after our next meeting, which is in 2 weeks.
Very good.
Thank you very much.
Are we all right with time?
Yeah, once you,
Because we pushed this once.
that's right, you did.
Although, no, you didn't open it.
No, yeah, you're fine.
We didn't open it.
We didn't open
Tonight,
it.
we're opening it so the clock
Right.
starts with the.
Okay, so you didn't open it last time.
Correct.
Okay, so we're all right.
Yes, so you're good. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Do you want this for any reason?
There's
no,
nothing
you
new in it,
No,
right?
nothing new.
So we're,
Okay, thanks.
All right. How's everybody doing, okay?
Yep.
All right, I know we have to circle back to application hearing determination, but before I do that, you're here on remediation.
Excuse me, sir.
That's Doug.
Doug, I'm sorry. You're here on remediation submission stuff?
Cap one.
Cap one?
Yep.
Does anybody mind jump to that, seeing as though
No.
he's the last person in our gallery instead of making them sit through the other stuff?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so moving a short shuffle of the agenda.
Well, actually, it's not really even a shuffle because we don't have,
8 Maple.
4 and 8 Maple. You guys
they're just
extended,
placeholders.
they're just placeholders.
Okay,
we'll-
so,
Thank God.
listen,
Yeah, but the next
wait,
meeting is gonna be.
I'm
a
trying to get us
very-
some credit with the,
Okay, yes.
we've moved a lot of things around so we can bring them up early,
Yeah,
right?
Let him go home. How about the rest of
Jason's
us?
looking
Can
for a
we go
little
home
credit
early?
here. Let's
That's
see
the
what's-
ticket. That's the ticket.
A little good
You're
will never
not
hurt.
very bright tonight.
I think we're all dragging a little. We're all dragging on. So IWV 2017-09, 89 through 91 Main Street, Cap One LLC, unapproved disturbance within 100 feet of an upland review area and extension of a parking lot, remediation submission review. Good evening.
Good evening. Take a couple seconds to get ready.
Take your time. We got all night.
See, we have all-
Jeez, Doug, I feel like I
Well,
haven't
you
seen
don't
you
even
in
talk
forever.
that.
I know.
No one else listens to
I'm not
me.
even talking on the phone anymore.
I know. I was getting worried.
Did we turn off the heat in here? Is that what happened?
I actually,
Brisk.
well, I turn the, what do you call it off?
There is no heat.
If I turn the air exchange on, I think it's gonna bring in cold.
It does.
Yeah, it's late now for
It's
it.
cold.
We're not usually bothered by the cold.
It's been a long week.
It has been.
Been a
I'm
long
so
week.
done with winter.
So I'm normally not bothered by cold, but when I get tired, I get humid.
Let's get Jason home.
How you doing, Doug? You all right?
I don't know if I can get this thing to work, I don't know.
I don't know, I had trouble the other time. It's thinking, it's doing it.
Is that the right, did I pick the right one?
Yeah, you did.
Well, let me start. Good evening, for the record, my name is Doug Rich. I'm a licensed landscape architect with Solely Engineering, office here in Monroe. Before, while this is thinking, I'm gonna pass out some additional materials.
Yeah, it usually doesn't bother me, but.
There we go. Thank you.
Yeah, usually I'm the one winding.
Did you say I'm whining?
I
Is that what
did.
what you're alluding to?
Whining, no, I'm saying usually I'm the one whining about
Yeah,
it.
you're making the insinuation that I'm not whining.
You're not whining.
I'll find you contempt of this
Thank
commission.
you very much.
I would probably come over and smash you if you were whining.
Oh, people are getting punchy here.
Stop that.
Oh, here we go.
Oh, excuse me, Don.
Are we ready?
I think so, thank you.
All right, thank you. Again, my name is Douglas Rich. I'm a landscape architect with Soli Engineering. I'm representing Maurizio Ricci. He's the tenant. Cap One owns this property. Maurizio owns Osteria Romana. And in late 2017, the wetland violation was noted by the town, and that's why we're here tonight to remediate that. Just a brief overview, this is Monroe. The project is located the southern property, the southern area of Monroe, just north of Trumbull. Route 25, Main Street is in this direction, 111 goes in this direction. A little closer view of the site. You can see the property here. Here's an aerial of the property, which shows the vicinity of the map. Stepney Volunteer Fire Department on this side, on the east side of Main Street, and 97 Main Street directly to the north. 75 Main Street, to which some of this of the encroachment has occurred on that property. 56 Crescent Place it directly abuts our property as well, but no remediation measures are going to be proposed on that. Crescent Place sort of comes behind the property in that area. Just overview of the property. We are not within a public water supply. There's no FEMA floodplains identified on this property. There's an existing heavily wooded area on the south and west sides of the property where the wetlands have been identified. There's a southwest view which shows a little bit more open during the winter months. The area that we're going to be talking about is in this sort of southwest corner here of the property. You can see the existing restaurant in this location, another two-story block building, commercial building in that area. The majority of the site is paved with the wetland area sort of meandering back behind the building and on the side of the property in that location. So I'm not sure if you have the plan sets that I've revised in your packets. It's a little bit different. I met with Scott last week and we discussed some of his comments, and we'll go over those after I present a little bit of this. But this plan that you see on the screen represents the culmination of my discussions with Scott. The overview of the project, we have the details for the plantings. We're specifying the town of Monroe regulated markers in certain points of the project. We've provided earthwork, an earthwork description that we're doing, although we're really not doing any earthwork. The planting schedule, obviously, and our reference notes to talk about where we got this information from. Let me just go back and we go back. The way we obtained the information on here was through the town, existing town records obtained from the inland wetland files. We did not survey this property, nor did we reflag the wetlands. The original wetland delineation was done by Environmental Planning Services back in 2007. It was located by Spath Bjorklund on their original site design plans for this property. Tracy Lewis Associates generated an as-built survey, which you can see as the basis of on your plans there. They generated an as-built plot plan, improvement location survey. That was the basis of our remediation work. They also located the inland wetlands on there from Bjorkland's original delineations. So, I provided the wetland delineation in your packets as well. The letter is in there. Lot area is about 0.8 acres. It's the amount of wetlands on the property is 0.034 acres. And then the upland review area, which you can see is designated by this line here, which is this area in here, is about a half an acre, 0.5 acres. Now, I'm not sure if you have this graphic, but this was generated by your department. This illustrates the town's vision of what the wetland encroachment was. You can see that the orange line delineates the property line. The red line delineates the 100-foot upland review area. This purple area shows what was perceived as the amount of encroachment on our property and also onto the neighbor's property to the south. This green line and shaded area delineates the wetland line. It's a little bit of enlargement of the site. Basically, we're trying to approach this the solution to this problem with 4 basic goals. Number 1 is to remove the placed fills within the area of disturbance. What happened was they basically placed millings beyond the approved parking areas, the previously approved parking areas. This area became a parking area with millings and has been operating that way for a while. Number 2, we wanted to remove the fence encroachment on this property over here. As you can see, this little set of railroad tracks illustrates the existing fence that's on this property and on their property. We're going to remove that as well. Number 3, we want, as a consequence, we're going to reestablish all of the wooded buffer area in that hatched area that you see, and on our property as well. And then number 4 was to install permanent measures which dissuade any future encroachment into the areas the off-site areas onto this other property. So a little, let me go into a little more detail on what we're proposing. The planting plan for this area, as you can see, is this double hatch line is a wetland restoration mix. It's for wet soils. Part of the process to remove the soils, and we discussed that with Scott, since we didn't redelineate the wetlands or analyze what was there, Scott had a good suggestion that we have a wetland soil scientist be present while the millings are being removed. I think that's a good idea. If he's out there, he can tell when we've reached the original subgrade of the soils, and that's when we stop. We're not proposing on excavating anything out of there. If anything, maybe a small top dressing of topsoil to establish the seed mix or scarify that. So we're basically planning on reintroducing overstory trees in this open area that you see here. An oak, Nyssa sylvatica is in here. Along the wetland edges and buffer areas, we've got a mixture of shrubs, buttonbush, spicebush, airwood viburnums, blueberries in that area. The hatches, like I said, the double hatch is a New England wet mix or restoration mix intended to be naturalized and left alone. This stipple pattern that you see on the side here are intended to be lawn areas. With the look of the restaurant and patrons in there, I felt like it was a good place to have a little bit more manicured look to it, up near the driveways and near the building itself. Part of the measures of containment of the property was, as I said before, relocating this fence system over here, split rail fence. So basically from this point all along the property line, we're marking the property line until we reach the wetland line over at this location. Then we go northward and follow the wetland line all the way until we get to the property line. And on that fence, periodically we'll have these the wetland markers put on the fence itself.
So you're taking that split rail fence all the way around?
All the way around. So it goes from here, around this little notch here, because that's where their well is, I guess. And then it goes up to here and then over towards the property line this way. So it's basically, that's your no-go zone for
Stop the
for
employees
everything.
from still parking over there.
Yes. They also, the trees also planted in here, and if somebody busted down the fence, the trees in here will stop people from parking as well. So, and we're trying to plant it up as much as possible, but it's supposed to be visually somewhat appealing as well. We wrestled with boulders and things like that, but I tried to maintain somewhat of a aesthetic to it as well.
And that's split rail, 2 rail?
Split rail all the way, yep. Now,
Doug, what about our discussion of over here? I'm concerned that here, and here are where the cars are hopping the curb and parking. So I'm agreeing that, some grass will look fine there, but the desire was to have something along the edge of pavement to prevent cars from hopping the curb and parking there. Because if there's not enough parking in that parking lot, they're gonna be drawn right.
What about just a split rail, some, decorative?
yeah, and I remember that conversation well, and I still didn't put it on there because I want to talk to the commission about it, but,
But it's good that I raised it.
yeah.
Why don't we just leave it as another parking space? I don't understand why it has to be grass, especially the one to the left of the building.
Is there a coverage issue or something?
Well, first of all, I thought that when you look at the property and the wetlands, I thought there was a desire to have something there other than pavement. I guess they could redo their layout and maybe fit another space in there, but I think what's happening is the car is parking up in this triangle, and it doesn't meet the
I don't think they could,
space
get in and out and with the
Yeah,
angles.
Oh, okay.
And I really didn't want to open that can of worms up
Well,
for
I've
this
been there when the
application.
people were parking across the street and trying to walk across 25. So, as far as I'm concerned, anything that could squeeze in another parking space might be a good thing for health and safety.
Maybe we just leave this alone and just
Um,
just say we're
But
good.
whatever happens, happens.
I will say that I like the plan. I think the plan's great.
It looks good.
It really, I think it addresses all the issues.
Thanks.
Where was the outdoor storage issue that we had, just so I remember? Was that behind the 2-story block building?
Yeah, well, I
I think
think,
so, yeah.
I think you might be,
Yeah.
because if you,
Well, I just remember seeing photos of a bunch of old tables and
Yeah.
2-tops and
they got, they, I don't know what they did back there, but they
2-tops.
brought some,
high-top
Hey.
tables.
yeah.
So how are we discouraging that going forward?
Well, like I said, I've planted this whole area up
Right
to the
behind
back
up
here.
to the building?
Yeah, this whole thing is all planted straight up to it.
Okay.
You know,
Quicksand.
yeah. Barbed
Can we get a
wire.
tiger back there?
Well, we talked about either some type of split rail fence, or you could put marker posts there.
I'm just, from a practical standpoint, I know that's probably where their snow is going in the winter.
How about-
How do you get it back in there and move
Here's,
it around?
here's what I think might be the most
Every night,
aesthetically
one of the
pleasing
commission
would
members will
be,
have to have to
why
make
not
sure
put
it
a
was in
small tree? They're not gonna
Sure.
drive through a tree.
In, like, well, this area here,
No,
you've got
put
the
a tree
propane
or
tanks are
something
right
like a
here.
Rose of Sharon or something like that.
Right in here you're talking about.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think I could do that.
Yeah, that'll do it.
That works.
Something gets big and bushy.
Rose of Sharon, lilac.
This area on this side, I think the proximity to the propane tank, this isn't really a good parking spot anyway.
No.
Especially
Yeah.
when you have the
That's
split
a-
rail fence there, you've instantaneously closed it off to,
Yeah,
it's
it's
not
a-
perceived as being a big space.
I think you did a good job on the plan.
I think so too,
Thank you.
very much so.
I just wanted to go through Scott's comments briefly and just make sure we touch base on everything that might pose a situation to continue this. In your packet, we got a letter from the owner as well, granting us permission to do the work. Maurizio will be doing the work on behalf of the owner, so I guess he's taking responsibility for encroaching. It's really not Cap One's fault, it's their responsibility since they own the property, but Maurizio is going to do the work. So we got a letter from the neighbor granting us permission to re-encroach back on his property to fix what he did. We talked about this, Scott, the conservation easement. I believe I checked that in error on the application. There is no conservation
Yeah,
encroachment.
you had me going there for a little.
You also have a letter in your packet from the health department, Rich Jackson, saying that he has no concerns about the septic system. I provided the soils report, the historic soils report in your packet as well, environmental planning services, and I discussed how we obtained at the lines and limits of our remediation. Under the technical, let's see here, we talked about the split rail fence, and we're going to add another tree to the plan to further choke that off. And I think that's basically it in a nutshell. If you have any comments or questions?
I do not. Anything from the commission? Staff?
You left us speechless tonight.
Yeah. good
Malcolm
job.
dead.
That's unusual.
That's because it's the first time I actually sat down with Scott and
Oh, yeah.
walked something through. We typically don't do that, do we?
No.
Yeah.
He does a good job of heading off issues.
Okay,
All right, thank you.
thank you so much. All right, so circling back to hearing, application hearing determinations, IWC 2018-03425 Pepper Street. I'm sorry, 03, it's 425 Pepper Street, Kidney, construction of driveway, parking, and storage area within the regulated area.
Okay, so, this is an application that some of you may remember.
What'd you lose, Doug?
Some of you may remember this, back in 2007. This was before you, as an application to improve or expand the site, put in a large storage building behind the house with parking and outside storage, et cetera. It got approved, they met the conditions of approval, and they did the construction, only they never finished it. and they got an extension, and then their total time ran out. That's how long it's been. They did not finish their commitment for planning and zoning requirements either. So we met with them in an attempt to remediate or to address the apparent violation. And they agreed to come in with new applications to inland wetlands and P&Z. They decided to change the rear lot, not much, minimal changes. So they're bringing this new application moving forward. Property is roughly an acre in size, and there are no wetlands on the property. There's 0.4 acres of upland review area, and they are proposing that complete area to be impacted with the proposed development. They're proposed to fill a 72 cubic yards, so it's pretty much a balance. Looking to use the excess, minimal excess, to just push around and make the final grades work. The proposal is for, as I said, the storage building is complete. So the proposal is for the construction of a driveway, parking, storage area within 100 feet of the wetland and within 150 feet of the West Paquonic River, west branch of the Paquonic River. The activities are excavation, pavement installation, drainage improvements, installation of septic system, installation of temporary material storage, and area and installation of landscaping. One big item that they are changing is they're taking the drainage that they had out. The original plan had a drainage system, it had an oil water separator, it had a small inlet that went into an oil water separator. And the reason they had that was they had a pad next to their dumpster enclosure where they were going to wash equipment off and do washing. And the washing was, they had put the mechanical unit in to address that. They're not planning on doing any of that activity now, so they felt they didn't need that drainage. There'll be sheet flow across the parking lot, goes through a crushed stone filter strip and into a stormwater quality basin and detention basin before exiting over a spillway into the West Paquonic. That is about it. That's what they can fill in, I'm sure, the rest of it.
Okay. Everybody there?
Oh, one thing I didn't look up, and I should have, was whether or not it was a public hearing the first time. I put it, on top of this, there was a sheet for the exhibits. You know what happened to that? And I had I printed up the approval letter.
Is this the building that they cut
It was
wood?
sitting in here, and there was a third thing to make it an exhibit.
Is this the property where they have all that cut lumber, trees and stuff? Is that the? So I'm trying to remember which building that
Let's
is.
see, does this tell us here whether there's a public hearing?
I drive by it a lot.
There's 423, there's 420.
Yeah, because like it's not the first one. I think it's the second one, and the guy has a wooded fence, but he has he basically brings in trees and he just splits the wood, and he has big piles of split wood. I think it's this one, isn't it?
I don't know, we'd have
Is
to
this
go.
the property with all that split wood?
I haven't been out there real recently. He does not have split wood on his plan.
All right, so that's not the guy then, okay.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out like what building is
There,
that?
I think that's the abutting property. Yeah, I think you're talking about an abutting property to the north.
Oh, okay,
It
okay.
has the split wood in it.
Well, yeah, he's a contractor, he cuts wood all the time and then he sells it right
Yeah,
off the
this
property.
is a landscaper who has
Yeah,
equipment.
I've never seen anything at that
And
building.
that's why
It's
they
like-
built the big building in the back, to put all their equipment in the building.
So everything black on this plan is proposed and everything that's grayed out is existing?
I believe so.
Because I'm having trouble figuring out this plan. Okay.
Yeah, the existing is very lightly shown.
Yeah, sure
If you
is.
look at the upper portion of the plan, to the left, you'll see that there's a box there, very lightly shaded gray. That's the big outside storage building that he built.
Okay.
Oh, my pen.
There's no contours. It's hard to see.
So I think, I'm not sure, I'm pretty
It
sure this
doesn't
was a public
say.
hearing when it was first heard.
I don't remember. It was too long
I
ago.
I
got
think
the-
all of these were pretty close to
Yeah, I got the
public, right?
approval
10
letter,
years
it doesn't
ago
say
now?
though.
You said,
11?
you said
Yeah.
2007, right?
Yeah.
What does it mean?
Yeah, we did, most of them were public hearings still back then, just like now.
So what do we think? Does this need to be public or regular?
Let me see, how far is it from the river? It's 50 feet from the river.
I've got to check, but they are indicating that there's a floodplain. The floodplain and the wetlands don't extend onto the property. They are on the Aquarian Water Company land that's just off the property.
Oh, so there's all that 75 foot then is buffer, basically. It's not,
Yeah. So we're dealing with the 100-foot and the 150-foot
right.
dimensions.
Is there any test pit data for the stormwater quality basin or whatever?
Where is that
I will look
basin?
into that.
Where are you seeing basin?
And I know, what?
You see, I can't find the basin.
This big rectangular thing.
That thing? Oh, I'm used to it.
Yeah.
That's a basin.
You said they took out the oil water separator, but they still included it in the specs, right?
I didn't
Uh,
preview this yet.
No, you said they took it out of you said they're not proposing it.
They're not proposing the mechanical unit, but they are proposing the water quality basin with the detention. That's staying in.
Yeah.
So the above-ground facilities are still there. They're taking, and the mechanical unit was the only thing connected to the mechanical unit was a catch basin in a small concrete paved area that they were gonna use for washing.
But now all this is gonna be paved,
Mhm.
right?
It is all gonna be paved.
And it's all gonna go to this leak off into the detention basin, and there's
Yeah, it won't be a
no-
leak off. The whole thing,
Yeah.
that whole side of the parking lot is a sheet flow into the basin, yes.
Right, I mean,
It doesn't look,
anybody else, but
Doesn't look
it
enough.
seemed to me that we need some structural, mechanical, measures, and on, commercial sites, oil water separators, but the Vortechnics, something like that,
well, remember that,
and you're so close, you're
The
right
water-
on the Paquonic.
yeah, I know, remember that the water quality manual, correct me if I'm wrong, the thinking is to avoid mechanical if you can.
Right.
Because when it comes to hydrocarbons, the way to treat hydrocarbons is through evaporation. So that's why I had them put the crushed stone filter strip there.
Mhm.
And if it goes into the basin, and it sits in the basin, it gets a chance to treat it where you can see it. Because the concern is with all these mechanical units, like, do they clean them out?
Yeah, they'll clean them out, exactly.
The other problem with this property is, but I think it's doable, because I had it before, is the profile's really difficult to get any larger system in. But
Well, the other thing
they-
is having hooded catch basins. I understand, but the treatment train that I'm looking at is you have the sediment and grit, and you have sediment that has stuff absorbed to it that you could knock out. And then you have the non-structural where you can do the other polishing. And if those hooded catch basins fail, then they're gonna have a flood in their yard, and they're gonna be forced to maintain it.
Oh,
And we have have them submit a maintenance plan.
okay.
Especially in sensitive areas like this, you're on the Paquonic, you're building, within that we have an extra buffer, extra protective zone, and, half of this basin, half of the stormwater on this site is in that,
Yeah,
you know,
I understand.
that extended
So-
buffer.
And what you're saying is the type of use, and that's what they had before, because like the thought was they're cleaning off mowers and stuff like that. And what they're saying now, well, we're gonna dry clean them, but what you're saying is, look, the type of use, you want both treatment type, systems there. So I can do that. I mean, they're gonna have to regrade the parking lot, so that it doesn't sheet flow off into the basin.
I mean, you know, they use these systems on subdivisions. It doesn't have to be a commercial site. They
Yep.
use them in residential subdivisions. Certainly in a situation where you're in a sensitive area like this, in the use that they're proposing, to me, just having that basin with a leak off is just, it's not acceptable.
All right, so I'll have them provide, a mechanical,
And the other thing is if they did test pits in that detention basin, especially down towards the end, to see where the water is.
I think, and I'm not fully remembering, it was 10 years ago, but I think,
It may
I'm
have.
remembering that basin doesn't have infiltration. It's got a drain at the bottom, so it's just acting as a detention basin, if you follow what I'm saying.
It does, maybe there is drains at the
There's a
bottom.
proposed precast concrete catch basin top.
Well, that's
The
just to get the
bottom of it.
water, that's in case it's frozen. So hold on a second, let me
Okay.
take a picture.
But that's even more of a case to have other measures on site.
It's a bunch of protocols.
Yeah, hold on, let me just double check.
And, you know, are those, I guess the other thing is, are those dry wells? And if not, where's the pipe that connects those to?
No, I stand
somewhere?
corrected, it does not have the drain, so you're right,
Okay.
it does have retention. It is a retention.
But what do those catch basins do?
The catch basins are put there so that if a water quality basin is exfiltrating water into the ground, infiltrating water into the ground, exfiltrating out of the basin.
Mm-hmm,
In the wintertime, when it's frozen,
mm-hmm.
having basin tops sitting there will give it a chance to get, the water to get into the area below.
So there's no pipe, there's no,
There's no pipe,
Pipes,
it's just a top sitting there.
okay.
I don't know how effective that is, but
No.
one could say, well, I guess if the bottom of the basin is all frozen,
Iced,
so is the CL top sitting there, so.
Regarding your request for the mechanical device, I don't know how you install it, because you only have a 2-foot difference in elevation from the parking lot to the bottom of that swale,
The only,
without getting some more elevation, digging the pond deeper,
the,
and then it's gonna be backed up probably with full of water right up to the surface.
Well, let's put it this way. The onus is on the applicant to prove that they can address the stormwater.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's,
yeah, there are some units that have like there's an overflow it's like almost like a type C catch basin top, but the back of the top has a slot in it, and so it goes into the control device, and it comes out that slot of the back of the basin. I don't know if you've ever seen that. I could ask him about that, but he's right, that's what I was saying, the profile. The only thing that kind of prevents me from getting too concerned about that is originally they did have a control structure in, so I'd have to see how they did that. Maybe they've changed the grade more than I realized, but I didn't think they did.
There's all kinds of test hole data on the sheet, but I don't see any where it's plotted on the
probably
plan
for the
anywhere.
septic.
So,
Yeah, a lot of it's
or maybe.
So I'll suggest that they provide mechanical if possible.
They need to address
a higher
stormwater
level.
in a better manner than just a leak off this site to
Okay.
satisfy me. But I'm not an engineer.
You could just say that.
No, you're just in charge of
Play one
water
on
quality.
TV.
Okay,
He just plays one on TV.
He plays in the dirt. Is that
On video.
Yeah, right.
All right, so we, I think we still have our original question, I think.
I move that we proceed to a public hearing.
Safety company. I'll second it. And the reasons being?
The potential impact to the wetlands and the water course.
Okay,
You
so,
satisfied?
So that it would be significant impact activity, which means they would have to follow
you second it?
I did.
Okay.
the section 7.6, something in our regulations.
Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Stewart and a second by Commissioner Spence. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much, everybody.
We did?
Say that.
You got a violation, yeah.
Beat that.
Sound like he's headed for the door.
What gave you that?
Yeah, that was
We
only
gotta
page
deliberate,
one.
too. We have one deliberation.
No, there's not too much.
Yeah, so moving right along to deliberation by completed hearings, the only thing we are to deliberate on is the Osteria Romana, IWC, IWV 2017-09, 89 through 91 Main Street. I will entertain a motion. I don't think we need too much discussion
Is
on
that-
this, but I could be wrong.
Is that those terraces?
Restaurant, yeah.
The restaurant.
Move to approve remediation plan.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
And, motion by Commissioner Spence, second by Commissioner Gingras.
Let me just go through what we have.
Please do.
So, number one is that they has offered that they have a soil scientist on site during construction to make the call on how much material to remove, when to stop excavation. And do you want one tree in the grass area, or do you want a tree on the grass area in each side of that rear building? They had grass on each side, so.
I think one side is probably a shrub or something is enough. A tree,
So
like the Rose of Sharon, I think that's what you mentioned?
On the south side, maybe. All right. So one tree. All right, and then commission needs to determine a timeline. That's something you didn't ask, and usually you ask how much time you think you need. But you should be able to come up with something realistic.
End of the fall? I'm thinking like
I was gonna say
October?
June.
July.
Oh, you're thinking earlier than that.
Get it
90
planted in the
days?
spring.
Is
Yeah,
90
that's
days
good.
enough?
March.
I would say
April, May, and
That's
June,
90
right?
Yeah, that's
May.
90 days.
June.
July 1st?
July
April,
1st.
May, June, yeah, 90 days. Oh, 180 days, you said?
20,
Oh,
How about by July 1st?
there you go.
yes.
Can we do that?
Yeah,
Yep.
that would be,
Okay. Anything else?
Yep, we're still going here. The tree, the limits.
You have a
okay.
budget meeting.
And then I think that is it. That's all I had. Anybody else have anything else?
No.
That's it.
Write anything down.
Okay, so I got it.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? So ordered. My commission was gonna be that a commission member had to be there.
Well, I
every
guess
day.
you don't, it's not an approval
Monitor.
for, it's not an approval for development, so you
Right.
don't need to state the reason.
right, it's a remediation.
Doing great.
All right. Moving right along, bond releases, reductions and reports.
So I s-
IWC 2016-03, 35 Cambridge Drive, Cowboys LLC, Mondial. Did I step on your toes over there, Scott? I'm sorry.
Yeah, 35 Cambridge Drive, I gave you a bond release report indicating that everything has been done. This one was, one odd thing about this was we didn't have a requirement for follow-up reporting. Somehow we must have missed it or something. The plants look very healthy. The property looks very well maintained, so we're pretty safe along those lines. Okay, so the recommendation is to release the $50,000
I
bond.
will entertain a motion on this.
Lois?
I have a motion by Commissioner Spence to release bond as recommended by staff. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Spence. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Second is by
Stewart.
Stuart, not Spencer.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Just we
We're
don't
always
want to
over
confuse the
Agreed
minutes.
in minutes again.
I know.
Any
abstain.
abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Bonds released. No time extensions. Now moving on to IWC, Inland Wetland Commission Agent Activities Report. Scott?
Yeah, we've got 3 agent approvals that were issued. First one is 100 Hammertown Road. That's you remember seeing that as a remediation, and it was handled as an agent approval before we kind of switched over to just the administrative. 603 Judd was installing an in-ground pool and spa, and 17 Montar Drive was an expansion of a garage and second floor addition.
Okay.
And I report those, by the way, when we send them out. They're being advertised now for the 15-day appeal period, and then they move forward. Permitted uses as of right. We have the Department of Public Works. You added that to the agenda.
Mhm.
The
Pepper Street drainage.
Pepper Street drainage, they've reported to me that they have some sinkholes in Pepper Street, so they're ripping out the pipe and they're gonna replace it. Coming down, it comes down along Pepper Street and connects into the Paquonic River over near Brook Street. So they're gonna replace as they go and see what they're dealing with. I think it's a corrugated metal pipe that they'll end up putting a ADS, corrugated ADS in its place. Okay? Then we move on to, there's no completed deliberations for remediation. Actually, there was, but you.
Oh, we did that. I'm sorry, I did it in the wrong
That's okay.
deliberation section.
It's all right. And then we're moving on to administrative review. We've got 17 Enterprise Drive. So let me pull that up for you.
And you got the packet.
You know, this might be a good time to tell you that we have, I don't know if you know or not, but we hired a replacement for Gabe.
Did she start?
She did.
She has started. Denise Halstead is her name, and she actually is a engineer. She's a licensed engineer.
Really? Are you threatened?
No.
Am I threatened? No.
Tired, I don't think so.
And she's just looking for part-time work.
Which is perfect.
Which is, I think, kind of
That's not
perfect for what we're.
one job.
So anyway, she helped with putting together some of this stuff, and
So this is her first attempt at it.
I want
better
to
than what
have her
Scott
come, I want to have her come and meet the
should be
commission,
fine.
obviously, but I haven't really, I'm gonna give her a chance to get settled first before we do that.
Want to meet this scary group.
So bear with me while I get this happening. We travel drive.
Had them in front of us so many times. Yes, yeah.
All right. I meant to look at this before the meeting and I never got a chance. So the background of the violation, it's at 17 Enterprise. It's really lot 5. It's the first lot on the left as you turn into Enterprise from Cambridge Drive. This is the Delmeticos, you may remember from some other violations that you've dealt with. And the origin of the violation is that they have requested a bond release. You may recall that this building had in wetlands approval. There is a current bond on it, and the requirement was a detention basin in the front with some landscaping and some encroachment into the upland review area in the side of the building. You may recall there was a violation that came up as a result of that approval, which was overfill on the side of the building, and they put in a planting scheme to address that. Well, this is further back behind the property, they're now encroached in there. So, description of the violation on the property is unapproved construction of phase 2. There was a concept plan for phase 2, which was a building in the back. They never applied for that, but they expanded the yard area in the back, and they are using it for, there's dumpsters back there. They're a tree, he's an arborist and a tree cutting company, landscaping, tree cutting. He is currently working with the Planning and Zoning Department to procure text amendment to allow his business in the zone. He's got this big, very nice building, and he doesn't have a CO for it because he's not allowed in the zone. So he's got an Attorney Thomas, working on that for P&Z, but in the meantime, he's got these dumpsters filled with the wood from his tree clearing, that he fills up the dumpsters and then they go off somewhere to be cut up and split or whatever. And he's not doing that operation there, but he's regraded, unapproved disturbance within a conservation easement. There's a small area of that I'll show you in a minute. Although the easement's not filed on the land records, it's on the subdivision and site plan. Unapproved clearing within 100 feet of an upland review area, and the creation of a depression with standing water in it. We think he excavated some material. There's a small pond there now that used to be just upland review area. So she's given you associated wetlands permits that I just talked about. Available records, documentation, lists of all the different things we've got, so you can kind of go over that at your leisure. Here is the site plan that shows the corner that I described, and this property goes all the way back to Pepper Street on this side, where you come in, here's the building, the plantings I was telling you about, the side of the property where they had the violation and they did the additional plantings was here, in compensation for it, putting too much fill up here. And as you can see, there's quite a bit of activity back here. So none of this is approved. The only thing that got approved was this came around and there was a small hammerhead right here in this area. Matter of fact, that's why that's not colored in. That was a paved hammerhead with some grading around it. That's why that's not pink like the rest of this. But all of this activity here is all dumpsters and stuff that he's filled up in here. This dark color here, that is the standing water, and the little pond that's been created outside of the wetlands, which is this green shadowed, shaded area here. The conservation easement is the yellow. So this area here is a conservation easement. So this purple area right here within the yellow is the encroachment into the conservation easement. So, the question from the commission, do you want me to issue a notice of violation?
Yes,
And do you want this to come before the commission?
yes.
Okay.
I have a question, though. Was the 100-foot buffer that was put on here, is that off of the pond or off of the wetlands?
The 100-foot buffer is off of this wetland.
Okay.
The
Pond's
pond
not
is
supposed to be
something new.
No, the
That's-
pond's not supposed to be there, but it's a regulated resource now.
Now
Well,
it is,
that's
yeah.
something that you have
So
to,
so now more of that parking lot
that's
is
a little rough.
in our,
And that's-
it's now more of that parking lot is in our upland review area.
right, that's something that you gotta vet out as part of when they bring the information to you. But
Yeah.
at least from the information that we've got here.
Invited to my house.
That's true, any water body, whether it's man-made or natural, becomes a water course or a wetland, and then is under our regulation.
What's the new person's name?
Denise.
Halsted.
Please extend our invitation to one of our meetings, if you wouldn't
Yep.
mind. I'd like to say hello.
Definitely do that. Okay, so.
Okay,
mark
notice
it
of
down.
violation, thank you very much.
NLB and Tree Commission.
All right, moving on to general discussion, other regulation amendment committee and public outreach committee.
Nothing.
Okay.
Did you talk to?
Nothing new.
Nothing
Did
new.
you check that email address that you gave me? Because I have sent you 3 emails and I haven't received any
About what?
responses.
Recently?
Within
No.
the last couple of weeks, yeah.
The Yahoo one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Was it
Okay, we'll
about
just have to
the
experiment
thing
on it.
about the library or the?
There was one about the library. Okay, so you did
I
get it.
think I did respond.
Did you?
I thought
'Cause
I
didn't get a
swear.
response, but that doesn't mean my
Okay.
AOL messes with
All
it.
right.
So Donna is working on the.
Sorry.
the-
Yeah, I do
Work,
get- I do
So
get
we're
work
still working
continues on both committees.
Yes,
So I can't do.
we're heavily at work. We can't
still-
divulge.
Thing that's gonna be ready in a week.
If it's aligned, then it's not a
No,
resource.
what if it's clay line? Ooh, it's gonna change my whole yard.
It could.
Okay,
Okay, moving right along, correspondence.
Oh, we have a pesticide application for some water course off of
18
Robin
Robin
Lane.
Lane,
18 Robin Lane. Do they have a pond?
I'm assuming.
I remember hearing it. Oh, Matthews Pond. Okay, so I guess yes, they have a pond.
So they
And there
corresponded with us that
apparently
they
is-
dumped, they already did it?
So they wanna kill the mosquitoes before they start coming up, okay.
No, usually this is
It's
Still
18 degrees
frozen.
out.
quite a pesticide. I don't know what they're killing.
Okay,
I didn't read.
and our final section, unless there's anything else,
Move to adjourn.
I have a motion by Commissioner Stewart, second by Commissioner Gerges. All those opposed? Say aye.
Opposed.
Close?
Sorry. All those in favor, say aye.
Still
I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
Notice nobody said aye either.
All those in favor say aye. I'm like, why is everybody saying aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion passes. Thank you, everybody.